Hey guys, it's Chris from Highline Guitars. You're watching another one of my YouTube guitar building videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I hope that by the end of this video, I'll have earned the honor and privilege of your subscription. The other day, a viewer commented on one of my videos, and I thought what he had to say was kind of interesting. And what he wrote was, how do the likes of Gibson, Fender, and PRS decide on their body shapes to get the best tone? Makes me wonder that if the body material was so crucial, that all would have the same shape and dimensions, albeit different wood species. Now this kind of plays into the whole tone wood debate, although it's not really directly related, it's sort of a ricochet. So, and I've been talking about that quite a bit in recent videos. So I thought that this would be an interesting topic to comment on, because what I think it does is it illustrates the difference between a solid body electric guitar and an acoustic guitar. With a solid body electric guitar, the shape and the dimensions, I'm not going to say that they don't affect tone, because the minute that I say that, somebody at some point in the future is going to do a scientific study that they'll publish, and it'll be peer-reviewed, that will demonstrate that it does in fact affect tone. I will say, however, based on my personal observations and experience, my hypothesis is that it does affect tone, but it's very inconsequential, very small, very minor. But more importantly, it doesn't matter. Now I keep saying this. I've made all these videos in recent months where I've talked about tone wood and what affects the tone of a solid body electric guitar. And in many cases I have said over and over that oftentimes it doesn't matter. And I keep pounding that home, because when I make these videos, people will still comment and they'll try to prove me wrong that wood does affect tone, and they'll lay out all the reasons why they think it does. But in the end, they still miss the point that it doesn't matter. And I'm going to try to explain that a little bit more in this video by answering the comment that was left by my viewer. In an acoustic guitar, you can very precisely control the tone of the instrument as you're building it. A skilled and talented luthier will know how to manipulate the wood so as to achieve, in the end, a desired tonal response. And they do this with tap toning. And what they'll do is they'll tap the wood and they'll listen to what that tone is. And very often they'll measure it to see what note that tone is when they tap it. If it isn't exactly what they want, they can manipulate the wood. They can shave the braces, they can thin and sand the wood in order to bring it in to that resonance response, that frequency response that they desire for their guitars. And this is important if you're making a lot of guitars with the same model and you want to build guitars that have what you would consider to be your signature tone. So you would start out with the uncut back and top, and you would hold it up and you would tap it and you would measure that response. Then you would cut out the shape of the guitar, you would glue on the braces, then you would tap it again. And you would continue to measure that as you carve and sand the braces, and ultimately you would eventually be able to dial in the tone that you're after for that instrument. That doesn't happen with solid body electric guitars. I've never seen a luthier or even a big guitar company ever manipulate the shape of the guitar in order to achieve a desired tone. Never. When it comes to the wood affecting the tone, when you have just a raw blank that you've prepared, you have no idea what that guitar is going to sound like in terms of its tone, its frequency response, until after the guitar is completely finished. You've done all the cutting, carving, routing, sanding. You've installed the pickups, the bridge, the neck, the frets, the tuners. You've strung it up, you've tuned it, and you've intonated it. It's at that point that you will know exactly what the guitar is going to sound like. But prior to that, you have no idea. By the time the guitar is finished, it's too late to do anything. You can't change the wood species. You can't change how it was carved and shaped in order to dial in a specific tone. If you want to do that, if you want to dial in a specific tone, the only thing you can do is change your pickups and your electronics, or the entire signal chain from the jack to the speaker in your amplifier. There's nothing you can do as far as the wood is concerned. It's a done deal. So the argument that the wood or the shape or the dimensions, the thickness, or whether it's solid or semi-hollow or a full hollow body, none of that matters, because you can't change it at any point while you're building the guitar. Now, I suppose technically you could. I mean, at the very beginning, you could pick up that big chunk of body blank and tap it and determine what that note is. And then after you've carved it out and routed the pockets, you could tap it again to see what the tone is, because it will change. And then you can start to sand and carve it in order to change the response to what it is you're shooting for. Of course, you have to know what you're trying to accomplish. You have to know what frequency response you're after. Otherwise, what's the point? You're not going to be accomplishing anything. But if you do know what frequency response you want when you tap the wood, you could technically manipulate the wood and continue to manipulate and tap until you get exactly the frequency response you want. Once you do that, then you would have you would at least be able to say, well, I know that the body is exactly the tone that I want. Now, of course, once you install the pickups and the electronics, that's going to add its own flavor. However, I don't know any luthiers or guitar companies that do this. If they did, think about it, every Les Paul would look different. Every Stratocaster would look different. Every Telecaster would look different, because every blank would have a different frequency response. And as they cut, carve, and route and shape the wood, in order to dial in their signature response, they would have to carve every single guitar a little bit differently to do that. In the end, they're not going to look the same. They're all going to look different. Now, one thought I had was, if the guitar didn't yield the frequency response that you're shooting for, you could drill holes in the back in order to remove wood in an effort to try to achieve the response. And that might work in certain situations, but the rub is, if you go too far, you can't go back. Oh, sure, you could probably fill in some holes, but if the response isn't right, and you know that drilling holes or changing the shape isn't going to get you there, you can't add back to try to get to what you want. So for the solid body, or even the semi-hollow or hollow body electric guitar builder, trying to mimic the efforts of the acoustic guitar luthier is a pointless waste of time. Nobody's doing it. And instead, what you can do is focus on achieving the tone that you want by the pickups that you select and the electronics that you install into it. You have a lot of leeway there, and there's a lot you can do in terms of those choices to manipulate and dial in the tone. And it takes some experimentation, and it takes some testing, and it takes experience. And it will also cost you money. Although if the pickups that you buy don't have the right tone, you want to make sure you purchase your pickups from somebody who will take them back and exchange them for other pickups as you attempt to dial in the tone. Now, I have looked at some of the history of guitar building, and specifically, the history of companies like Gibson and Fender and PRS. But nowhere in that history, and I've read quite a bit of history. Here's just a small sampling of all the different books that I have on the subject of not only the history of guitars, but how guitars are made. And one thing I have found interesting is I have never been able to find a definitive description or explanation as to how companies like Gibson and Fender arrived at the shapes of the guitars that they sell. There has been some history in terms of how the guys at Gibson worked with Les Paul to dial in the specifications of the original Les Paul guitar. But really, the only thing he offered was that he wanted a maple cap on top of the mahogany body. Other than that, there doesn't seem to be a lot of information regarding discussions that the folks at Gibson had either internally or with Les Paul about how they arrived at that shape. Same thing is true with Leo Fender and the Stratocaster and Telecaster. In the end, and this is only my hypothesis, is that when they designed those guitars, they were creating shapes that they felt were going to sell well. They knew that if the shape wasn't appealing, the guitar isn't going to sell, because the person playing the guitar wants to be standing in front of their audience, whether it's an audience of one or an audience of 100,000, and they want to be holding a guitar that looks really cool. If it doesn't, the guitars aren't going to sell. And I think that it was aesthetics that really pushed the design of those guitars. That's, I think, probably the single most important factor in designing the guitars that Gibson and Fender and PRS and all the other companies out there, especially the big ones. Even the small shop luthiers, those guys will tell you that they're trying to create a shape that they think is going to be appealing. They're not building a shape that they think is going to sound really great. Their primary focus is aesthetics. Now, there's also the issue of ergonomics. And there's a gentleman who sent me a video just recently of a guitar that he built, and I'll post a link down in the description below, of an ergonomic guitar that I thought really looked very cool. So that was what I would consider to be a perfect example of how both aesthetics and ergonomics play a role in determining the shape of the guitar. It's not tone. It never has been tone, and I really doubt that it ever will be, because there's just too many other things that we can change to make the guitar sound really good. As a result, we as luthiers have the freedom to create some very unique, interesting, exciting, artistic, inspiring shapes without having to worry about whether or not that's going to affect the tone or even the sustain of the instrument, because we know that those elements, those factors, can be affected by other components in the guitar. So I hope that this video has provided you with some food for thought. I'd be curious to know what you think. Be sure to post your thoughts down in the comment section below. But please don't try to hit me with all kinds of what you consider to be proof that wood affects tone, because as I've said before, I firmly believe that wood does affect tone. I just don't think it's that important, and it really doesn't matter anyways for the reasons I just explained in this video. At any rate, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. That's the very least you can do to support this channel. Hit the subscribe button. Visit eguitarplans.com or my Highland Guitars merch store. There's a link in the description below, and you can purchase plans for building guitars as well as the tools that we use to make guitars. And you can get some cool things like t-shirts, and I just added a coffee mug the other day, so I may be adding some more things in the future. We'll see. At any rate, any purchase you make there is going to help support this channel so that I can keep making videos on building guitars. And at the very least, if you want to keep it simple, there's the thanks button down below that you can click and leave a tip in whatever amount you think is fair. At any rate, until the next episode, as always, take care, stay safe, and I hope you'll be back for more future guitar building videos.